What can be more stressful while traveling than getting through that TSA security check? Even for me, after over 100 of flights having under my belt, it still can get intimidating having to get past the officials in uniforms. So in this video I will share with you the top 10 mistakes you should avoid at all costs to go through the TSA, airport security and move on with your flight and your travel as smoothly as possible. The last tip is probably something you would never expect to hear, but I really believe it can vastly improve your time in the airport. The first mistake might sound obvious, but is still being overlooked lots of times. In Poland we say, as you make your bed, so you must lie in it. And it applies so much to traveling, because everything that hasn't been prepared the proper way will lead to frustration later on. And that is what happens when people who are preparing for a flight don't pack their carry-on luggage thinking of the security check. How does it look? Well, they would arrive to the TSA and then it turns out their liquids or electronics are at the bottom of their bags and they need to throw everything out of the backpack in stress when the people behind them are ranting. So how can you avoid this mistake? First of all, make sure that while packing you consider that you will have to take some of the stuff out. You should always put the liquids in an easily accessible place in your bag and, which is so important, make sure that they are in TSA compliant containers smaller than 100 milliliters. The other thing is electronics. The bigger ones like laptops or tablets also need to be put aside when going through the check. So the same thing applies. Place them in such a place that you can easily and quickly take them out for the check. Some might get tempted to take a tablet in a separate case to make it easier to show it in the TSA, but that can lead to another mistake, which is the second one on the list. Maybe you will arrive to the airport early, grab a snack, maybe a bottle of water, you will get bored in the line for the security check, so you'll grab your phone to scroll a little bit. And what happens is that you arrive to the line where you are suddenly expected to take out the liquids to put everything into the trays, but your hands are full. You're rushing to put everything into the bag or your pockets, which you will have to empty anyway. It's just too much unnecessary stress for you and those around you. In order to get through the security quick and without stress, make sure to not hold too much stuff in your hands, and if you do have a bottle with you, make sure to throw it away before the security check. What I strongly suggest is having a fanny pack or a sling on you where you can put all the stuff you need to have in an accessible place. That will make the process much easier, as you will only need to put the sling on the tray instead of emptying your pockets and your hands and then collecting it all after it has been checked. Now, the sling might help also with a third mistake that is very often made by many travelers but is easy to avoid. This one strongly depends on the airport, as the process might look different for some of them, but it's especially frustrating at the airport in Krakow, from which I usually leave for a travel. Some airports just let everyone to the line, but when they are preparing for the security check, the officials are asking them for their documents, their tickets and their ID. In some airports it looks a little bit different. For example, in Krakow, there's a checkpoint with a turnstile before the actual security check where you have to scan your ticket. And a very common mistake is that people are not expecting it there. They get to the turnstile and while in shock search in a hurry for their documents. Then it turns out that the phone is dead, or they have no internet connection to open the ticket, or the printed out ticket is at the bottom of their bags. So you can feel the frustration of everyone around, and that can be avoided. You should make sure before getting to any line or any check that takes place at the airport to have your documents prepared. That means having a ticket printed out in a place where it's easy to take out. If it's a digital ticket, make sure you have downloaded it and you can use it without an internet connection and your phone is charged. And the same with your ID, you should be able to take it out easily whenever you're asked to do so. That's why here slings come in handy as well. Now, the fourth mistake is also something I witness almost every time I'm at the airport, and it can not only make the security check longer, but in general make the airport experience miserable. It happens a lot that people arrive at the airport and rush to the sign that says departures without giving it a thought. My point is that not having a plan of what to do at the airport will only cause stress, running back and forth, concluding with going through the TSA in a hurry. What I would recommend is to get at the airport and first check, okay, I have to first check in my luggage, let's do that. There's the screen with departures, let's search for my flight. There it is, the check-in is at gates XYZ. After the luggage is done, then you look where to go for the boarding gate. Check that on the screen too. There might be many TSA lines that depends on the airport, so it's always better to have a proper check on where to go next. And when you decide to go to the security check, make sure you have only the stuff with you you're allowed to bring on board. Everything is packed and ready for the TSA check. So again, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. And the fifth major mistake I see people making is also all about preparation. And this is something I try to avoid whenever I can. I had to learn it the hard way, unfortunately. Once it cost me an additional fee, the other time I almost were late for the flight and I've been called by the airlines to proceed to the gate as quick as possible. So since then I have paid much more attention to it to not make that mistake ever again. And it's so easy since all you have to remember about is to go to the airline webpage or the app a day or a few before the flight. Because the mistake I'm talking about is not checking in ahead before getting to the airport. If you're traveling with your carry-on luggage only, it will make the whole process so much faster, as if you already have the ticket after online check-in, you can just go to the TSA security check, for which you will have much more time, and you should also have all the necessary information about the gate you should approach on the ticket. Some airlines, in my case it was Wizz Air, charge you additionally for checking in less than a few hours before the flight. So make sure to do that at home, you will definitely save yourself a lot of stress. The next one is something that has also happened to me many times, and since then I always try to avoid that mistake. Has it also happened to you that when you arrived to the security check you weren't 100% sure what was in your bag? I don't mean that someone packed for you or you didn't pack consciously, but I sometimes took a backpack that I haven't used for over a year. Put the stuff in it and left for the airport. And at the airport it turned out there was a pocket knife or a lighter or anything else that should not be there for a security check. So the mistake I always try to avoid is not fully unpacking the backpack before packing for a flight. There are sometimes so many pockets that an item could be easily forgotten and taken to the airport. That's why it's important to quickly go through the pockets and take everything out that was left there from previous travels. It takes just a few minutes but can do a big difference and save you a lot of stress when you could be suddenly asked the most frightening question: is it your backpack? The next TSA mistake is something that I started avoiding with getting more experience as a traveler. But I see it still happening all the time, and it's quite frustrating for the one that has to look at it when I want to get through the security check as quickly as possible. It's so annoying when you start putting your stuff into the trays, emptying your pockets, taking out the liquids and everything that has to be done. And suddenly the person in front of you realizes that they need more trays because they had to also take off their jacket, or it turned out they can't put the electronics on the same tray as their suitcase. And they go back. They need to move my stuff to put another tray and make a lot of mess and confusion. So the mistake is not preparing the right amount of trays right away and not knowing actually how many will be needed. How to avoid it? Well, that also would come with experience, but it's always better to have few more than too few. Just take 4 or 5 at the start, and if you have one left at the end, just put it back. And until you haven't put everything into the trays, don't move on with shoving them into the scanner, as you might be going back and frustrating the next person in the line. Usually I take 3 trays. One for the backpack, another one for the liquids, phone, sling or anything I have in my pockets, and the last one is with my jacket, belt or anything I would have to take out additionally. Getting to mistake number 8. It reminds me of driving in a traffic jam. There are those drivers always in a hurry, changing lanes every second when they see that one or the other moves slightly faster. And there are also those who are chilled and relaxed, pick one lane and stick to it even if it seems like the other one is moving much faster. Obviously, my point was that it's similar when waiting in line for the security check at the airport. But there's more to it. Getting back to our traffic example, or in general, car driving. I bet I'm not the only one that gets to traffic lights and chooses the lane where there are no buses, no trucks, or whatever seems to be slower than you. And everything I just said applies also to TSA lines. The mistake I see people making is not standing in the right line. And there are many reasons for that, where one of them is that some people are those always in a hurry ones that want to get to the line where there's fewer people. But it might end up in a line only for families or only for the airline staff. So it's very important to look, first of all, if the line I'm waiting in is right for me. I also prefer to stay in my line regardless of which one is moving faster and not to switch, because as with the traffic jam example, at the end everyone gets through it at the same time. The only thing you might want to consider though is that families with small kids or elder people, respect seniors, might need a bit more time to deal with the security check. So if you're really impatient, go to the line where there's less families but maybe more business travelers that know the drill much better. Number 9, probably the most important mistake that I see people making. So this one is definitely something you learn to avoid over the years when you get used to flying and the whole process. And you also have much more experience on various airports with different situations. But that's why I'm here. You can use my experience to improve how you travel. And when I say different situations, I really mean it. It has happened to me many times that I had to get everything out of my backpack, that I was checked for explosives, for drugs, I was almost late being called out via radio, and many other stressful situations. And the thing is that being checked by security, sometimes soldiers, is really intimidating itself, and when you add some unusual things, many people get really nervous, and that's the mistake. As soon as you're not doing anything against the law, what I hope is everyone's watching this video case, there's nothing wrong that can happen really. But you must know that it might happen that you will be searched or checked additionally. Maybe you don't have experience and are slower, or you forgot to take something out of your backpack. Don't worry, try to stay calm and just follow the instructions. Acting calmly will make your moves smooth, and smooth is fast. Before we get to the last mistake, I would like to ask you to subscribe to the channel if you find this content valuable for you. Now the last one, mistake number 10. It might be controversial, as the most people would probably advise you to do the opposite. Before we get to it, I want to tell you it is a mistake only in certain situations, so please don't rant at me as soon as I tell you what it is. And the mistake is arriving at the airport too soon. Yes, you heard me correctly, too soon. For many, being earlier is the best way to be able to deal with everything easily without stress, and that might be true. But if you really want to travel like a pro and save yourself a lot of time and maybe enjoy a few more hours in your travel destinations, don't do this. Now, as I said, my advice of arriving at the airport not too early does apply only in certain situations, which are when the airport you're flying from is fairly small and if you have already traveled from there. Now, let's look at the timing. If the plane leaves at 8 AM, for example, the boarding usually starts about 7:30. And if you didn't do the mistakes that I mentioned previously and you have checked in online and you don't have registered luggage, how much time do you really need to get to the gate? I won't tell you the exact time, but when I had a route I was frequently flying, I was arriving at the airport 45 minutes before the takeoff. That's a bit extreme, but I believe 1 hour and a half before the flight is usually much better than 3 hours, where you then have to wait for 2.5 hours for the start. And 2.5 hours more in the place you're visiting might be priceless. Now, one of the mistakes I told you about was about packing the carry-on, but this itself is a much broader topic, as there is so much more that could go wrong and ruin a trip. To see which mistakes are to be avoided when it comes to packing your carry-on luggage, make sure to watch this video. Cheers, safe travels and do zobaczenia!